Over the past 20 or so years, two factors have greatly influenced the evolution of tillage systems for vegetable production in California. These seemingly unrelated drivers for change have been, first, the availability of new types of tillage equipment that have been developed by local engineers and entrepreneurs. And second, the rather phenomenal rise in awareness of the importance of following so-called soil health principles in crop production systems that prominently include preserving surface residues and maintaining green plant cover over the soil for as long as possible during the year. Unlike other parts of the country and world, where dramatic changes in tillage management systems toward no-tillage and strip tillage have occurred over the past 50 and 20 or so years respectively. These practices have recently been adapted with success to dairy silage production systems in California, but really not at all for the production of vegetables. In fact, interviews with old-time farmers, as well as surveys of farmers during the past 20 or so years, indicate that tillage practices for California's high-value vegetable crops have changed very little during the past 90 years since the introduction of irrigation in the state in the early 1930s. Defined as the physical manipulation of soil for the purpose of crop production, tillage is an important age-old part of most crop production systems, and particularly of high-value vegetables. And until recently, it has been performed by a precise series of specialized tractor-drawn implements such as discs, land planes, mulchers, and bed shapers, or what are typically called listers. These implements pass through fields to incorporate post-harvest residues back into the soil so that they break down and decompose and prepare optimal seedbed conditions for the next crop. Traditionally, several of these sorts of intercrop tillage machines have been universally used for conventional vegetable production fields. Beginning, however, about in the mid-1990s, a variety of new pass-combining tillage tools became available for California vegetable farms. These new machines were developed over the course of several years of careful design and engineering improvements by two local California-based companies. Alan Wilcox of Wilcox Agri-Products in Walnut Creek, California, was one of these early pioneers of these new machines that essentially contain a variety of pretty much stock tillage tools, but engineered or configured in ways that achieve, he says, better than conventional tillage results in terms of soil preparation and, importantly, crop yield at lower cost. Alan takes great pride and advantage in being an equipment manufacturer and also a farmer.
My name is Alan Wilcox. I own Wilcox Agri-Products, a tillage manufacturing company based in the West, in California. When I introduce myself, generally I start with my passion, which is that I'm fifth generation California farmer. And just this year, we've added the 7th generation into the operation. So the reason I say that is because we've been at this for a long time in food and fiber production. And with the 7th generation, we intend to stay in this for a long time. So we want to have longevity on the farm, and we've been into it for a long time to try to sustain the operation. And where we fit in the puzzle, one has to back up a little bit and consider where we are, where we're producing food and fiber in the West versus maybe where agriculture is most known for, the Midwest, where corn and soybeans are the big crop. And then as you venture south, you'll get more into cotton. And so you have 3 basic commodities that represent a large portion of U.S. agriculture. But in California, we have so many crops. The best way to describe that, we are a small operation of only 80 employees. But if you look at our product mix, our product line, if you combined all of the tillage products that Case New Holland manufacture, combine that with all the tillage products that John Deere manufactures, they probably do not represent 20% of the products that we manufacture. And the reason we have to have such a broad spectrum of products is because California's crop production and fiber production is so diverse. And so what works for strawberries isn't going to work for cotton. What works for soybeans isn't going to work for romaine. And so we don't make big, high numbers of any single product, but we have a very diverse, wide-ranging number of products. We're very unique, but it's not because anything special about us or about the Wilcox family. It has more to do with the arena that we were dropped in 1846. And that arena is so diverse, which I've already mentioned, but we're farmers first. So we're in the production of food and fiber. We're in managing labor. We're in managing tractors. We're in managing herbicides, fertilizers. But most importantly, we're an ongoing business that in agriculture, there's a tremendous amount of production capital that need to be invested before that crop is harvested. And many of these crops, it's an annual crop. So there could be 6 to 8 months in a budget. In some situations where we're working behind a wheat crop to put in a tomato crop the next spring, we might have a budget that runs 15 to 16 months. And so the growers that are out here that's a small group. We are one of them. But where we're truly unique is that we're grower manufacturers. So we're growers trying to grow these diverse crops, these high cost crops. We're still trying to pay off the bank. But the point is, we as the manufacturers that are developing new strategies in tillage, we are much closer to what the hurdles, pitfalls, and issues that our counterparts, our colleagues in the food and fiber production are in. So we are so much closer to what a lettuce producer in Salinas deals with than somebody in Waterloo at John Deere. We're much closer to somebody in Five Points, California, growing melons than somebody in New Holland, Pennsylvania. And so it gives us a chance to be on the cutting edge of the spear, the tip of the spear, because we are so small. We are in the production of food and fiber. And so we can see this is not working. We're not going to be able to pay off the loan like we want to. We're not going to be able to utilize the tractors or the manpower that we have with the strategies that served my father and grandfather well 40 and 50 years ago. And so because we're farmers first, that has always given us a better window or insight in how we have to evolve, at least tillage, over the next 10 or 15 years. And so all of our equipment, it's not a run of the mill, this guy makes 10 siding and that guy makes 10 siding and that guy makes 10 siding. No, we have to make strategies that make what we're doing today obsolete so we can be competitive tomorrow. And so everything that we build is along that line. Talking about yield is on our revenue side of the equation, just like anybody else's budget. We have two components that deal with our revenue side of our budget, basically yield and price. We can't control price, but we can affect yield. If we look at and that's a multiplier. In other words, if we're growing 4-ton wheat, it's multiplied by whatever we get per ton of wheat. So there's only two components to our revenue side, and they complement or affect each other. And so if I lose yield, it affects the outcome on a multiplication basis, not a sum or an addition like on my cost side. If we look at my cost side, I've got labor, I've got capital investment on equipment, I've got repair and maintenance on my equipment, I've got herbicide, fertilizer, workman's comp, everything that you can imagine. I probably have got 50 different items on my cost side. And by addressing only one of them, it merely does, in mathematics, it's only a subtraction. It's not a multiplier. So on my cost side, it is very difficult to make my budget go black by only addressing some of my costs. And the point that I'm getting at, yield is still king. Yield is still king. So anything I do on my cost side of the budget has to maintain maximum yield. So that gets back to the products that we develop here at the plant. The ultimate goal, and it's a cake and eat it too thing that we do occasionally achieve, is increased yield at a lower cost. That is the goal. And mind you, we're not just mining these ranches and assuming there's going to be development and houses and industry on these ag lands. I've got seventh generation. I will remind you, I've got the seventh generation on the farm. So we've been doing this for 200 years. We intend to do it for another 200 years. So we're not going to mine and destroy the land. We intend to grow crops on it for quite some time. So if we look at probably the best example of this philosophy is the eliminator. The eliminator is a tool that we wanted, its number one thing was we realized we could not jeopardize yield. The one thing that we found out that their conventional tillage wasn't always the best way to maximize yield. There was other tricks. There was other things that we could do to soils that would actually increase yield, increase microbial activity in the soil, get more out of some of the fertilizers that we add, get more benefit and more weed control out of our fumigants that we're using for tomatoes. And so there was a lot of things we could do that we realized, wow, we don't have to beat the ground to death to ensure the best yield. We had to be smart on how we did the tillage to get the best yield. The number two requirement was obviously cost savings. In today's agriculture, everybody focuses too much on cost savings and not enough on maintaining yield. And so what we're doing, we're closer to low till and minimum till, but we're trying to get conventional tillage yield results. And so we've picked components in the eliminator that not only do what we need to do to get fines for good seed to soil contact, to get good root development, to get a good level platform for our planters and listers to work by, but we use components that are all common components in the industry that have been in other tillage tools for over 100 years. But we pick components that complement and multiply the benefit of the tool that is adjacent to it or following it or preceding it. So the Eliminator has very simple components that the unique thing about this tool is how they interact. It's not that it has some fabulous new geometry or physics in some tillage component that's never used. What is unique to this tool is how they're used in combination with each other to get us a better than conventional tillage environment for seeds and roots to develop. And so that's what the Eliminator does. And we're talking about anywhere from a $25 per acre savings to, in some situations, a $300 an acre savings. But we don't even care about the $300 an acre savings if we're growing a lettuce crop that we hope to get $20 to $40 a carton at 1,200 cartons an acre, and we knock 300 cartons off of his yield. That $300 is going to go real fast. And so particularly with the high value crops we have in California, we have to relook at some of these cost savings strategies that the other tillage manufacturers are pushing. And we got to look at the bottom line. And being producers ourselves, we always look at more than just in our SolidWorks computer that's developing these components. We are, because we're growers and producers, we says, okay, how's that going to affect our bottom line? It's not, if you look at some of my competitors, it affects their bottom line and how they pay their rent and how they keep the light bill, how they pay their welders and this and that. The components that we put out over here are not necessarily components that just keep Wilcox Agri-Products doors open. They are products that long prior proved that they are a way to ensure Wilcox Farms has a future. And so long before it hits our programs in our engineering centers, long before it gets there, it already has to prove an economic benefit to my bottom line on the farm. And that is unique to us, and we don't deserve really much credit for the arena that we fell into. And so John Deere is not producing crops, Case is not producing crops, Agco is not producing crops. And so that puts me one step closer to one that has to make a budget work. And so that makes a greater motivation and a shortcut to innovation that is going to maintain and improve yield at a much lower cost, and in most situations, increase the longevity of our fields for the future. The thing that anybody that is going to be involved in agriculture in the United States has got to understand the environment that we operate in producing food and fiber is much different than a third world country. But any country can jump into agriculture in a heartbeat. So imagine a country that is burdened with regulation, burdened with difficulties in just doing business, whether it's taxation or regulation or available labor or available resources, and anything that's available is always at a premium. No matter what we do in the United States, it's going to be more than any of the countries that we compete with. We have to be far more advanced than our competitors that do not have to be advanced, that have labor cheaper, have water brought to them by the government, have land leveling done by the government, land development done by the government in these other countries. And their cost of production is significantly lower than the United States. I can ship product, my manufacturing product, through the sea to Australia for about the same cost as to truck some of my products to Texas. So that means we live on a small planet. So depending upon the commodity, depending upon the crop, particularly if it's made for fiber, somebody halfway around the globe can take my markets away from me. Because transportation is not, we live on a small planet now. And so if you're going to go forward and you want to be part of U.S. agriculture, you are going to have to be the best of the best. If you're going to have an arena to work in and not be taken away by these other countries that have huge advantages on the cost side of production. What I want to add to those that are viewing this, that are looking at a future in particularly West Coast agriculture, there is strategies that are out there that are not being implemented today. We've got a lot of things that we've developed on the research side that have to buck old strategies. And you got to understand, I borrow $3 to $4 million a year for my farming side. I've spent the last 50 years developing some kind of strategy to grow a crop at the prices that I'm given, and I pay off the bank. So when you put 5, 10, 15, 20 years in developing these strategies that finally pay off the bank so I can do the miserable job again next year. But the point is, it took a long time to get that in place. And so many of you are going to be, the future could be in illustrating, marketing, educating the users. If you're not going to be a user, there might be 20 or 30 or 40% of you that are actually having to practice these strategies, so you do have a job in 10 or 15 years in food and fiber production. But just because I build an eliminator, just because I've proven I can increase yield at a lower cost, that doesn't mean it's implemented. And so on the marketing side or the illustration side or the adaptation of these technologies, there is a huge opportunity for those in the industry of food and fiber production to get these strategies that are almost a secret out there to the community. And I'm not saying we're keeping them a secret, but when you consider growers that have a $200 to $100 million budget, and they've been able to borrow $100 million and make 102 or 104 or whatever, sometimes they don't want to change that routine because they don't want to sit there and make $90 million and borrow $100 million to get 90. And so the clever people, the people that can really illustrate, and the people that can work with the growers and the growers that have a thirst for this efficiency to grow bigger crops for less money. We can't get good root systems if we're out there running a ripper shank in the mud and just merely making a groove. We're actually adding to the lateral compaction. And so many of you have to learn the old style way, what's on the end of that shovel that I bring up. And we got to kind of turn the page back and learn what daddy did and granddaddy did and his daddy did on when they knew how to work ground. And whether that be consulting or introducing growers to new strategies that are more efficient, that lead to high yields, that may be an opportunity for you that are viewing this video.
At about the same time that Alan Wilcox and Wilcox Agri-Products were developing their line of innovative tillage equipment in the early 1990s, another pioneering California company, Tillage Management Incorporated, that was started by Kevin McDonald and later continued by Cat Coombs, Mark Hoffman, after Kevin's passing in 2020, designed and manufactured a similar pass combining machine called the Incorporator that later evolved into today's optimizer. This implement also greatly reduces tillage passes across a field and yet still accomplishes soil and seedbed preparation similar to conventional multi-pass approaches.
Hi, I'm Kat Coombs with Tillage Management. We make the Optimizer one-pass tillage system. The Optimizer is a tillage implement that provides complete conventional tillage with minimal passes. So compared to traditional conventional tillage, which typically uses 4 to 10 passes of various discs, chisels, harrows, lamb planes, and other implements, the Optimizer combines these implements into one frame for a one-pass result. Now, depending on the depth of tillage needed, the Optimizer is usually run alone, or it can be run in combination with a deep ripper. It could also be run with a light chisel for a 2-pass alfalfa program. The key thing when running with a deep ripper is to immediately hit it with an Optimizer afterwards, so you're not left with large clods on top, which really have trouble breaking down once they dry out. But even if run as a 2-pass program, the Optimizer does reduce fuel use by over 50%, it reduces tillage time by over 60%, and it reduces emissions and dust by 25 to 60% depending on the particle size. This helps farmers save over 50% in tillage costs alone, as well as providing other benefits. Now, one of these benefits is faster tillage. With less of a time requirement, farmers can wait for optimal soil conditions and moisture conditions to complete their tillage, which improves the tillage result and long-term health of their soil. Farmers can also reduce the risk of missing their planting deadlines if seasonal weather comes in and cut short their tillage operations. Another benefit is the impact on long-term soil health. So because the Optimizer can be run in optimal moisture conditions, you're not running in, too wet or too dry, which causes extra compaction and not as good as incorporation. So the Optimizer is composed of a set of interchangeable implements. It's taken a long time to really refine these implements and get them to work in a complementary fashion. But the basic premise is that we start with disc blades. The disc blades are at a particular alignment and angle in order to invert the soil and create the finish that we want. Behind the disc blades follows mid-reels, which are used to control the flow of dirt from the disc blades and incorporate plant material into the soil. After the mid-reels, we have adjustable chisels. Now, the chisels can work at depths from 6 inches to about 18 inches, depending on the setup and the spacing. And this is so you can directly hit the traffic pan, whatever depth it is in the soil. Because the chisels do create a little bit of mess after them, we have a few rows of baskets following the chisels to clean up that soil. And behind that is a finish roller, which is going to create your finished seed bed. Our goal is to protect and preserve the healthy aggregates in the soil, which are critical for a healthy subsoil full of worms, fungi, and microorganisms. Every pass with a tractor and an implement has an impact on the soil by usually creating compaction, either at the surface or deeper down. The particles created by compaction tend to stratify into layers, with finer particles sitting on top, ready to blow away as dust. By reducing multiple tillage passes into one pass, you can avoid creating new compaction and keep an even mix of clod sizes and aggregates throughout your tillage depth. Now, within one unit, which is about 40 feet long on a true one-pass tillage unit, we have about 7 rows of implements. Now, we can change out each of these rows to accommodate the particular soil type and crop type of the farmer. So that makes it customizable for every farmer. We can also customize the working width of the unit. So the full-size Optimizer is an 18-foot wide, 40-foot long unit with all of those rows of implements in them. But we also have a 12-foot wide, 40-foot long implement with all the same rows, just at 12-foot spacing. The benefit of the 12-foot unit is that it doesn't have folding wings on it, which makes it quite a bit lighter than an 18-foot unit. So when you're working in vegetables with drip tape, you don't sink as low and you're able to ride above the drip tape and get a better finish. Another benefit of the Optimizer in vegetables is that you're not creating additional compaction that you would with a chisel plow or other cultivators at times. You're creating nice fluffy soil on top, evenly mixed, not over-tilling. It is sometimes a challenge for a farmer to switch over from their traditional tillage program to an optimizer.
We've now seen two innovative approaches to combined pass tillage: the implement offerings of Wilcox Agri-Products and those of Tillage Management Incorporated. Both of these approaches essentially achieve conventional tillage seedbed preparation outcomes and conditions, but with considerably fewer tillage implement passes across a field. While smaller, lesser horsepower requiring models of these implements are available, both the Eliminator and the Optimizer machines tend to require large tractors with high horsepower. At about the same time, and continuing after these tillage implements were introduced in the 1990s, the general concept of soil health also began receiving broader attention. The four generally accepted principles of soil health management are: minimize disturbance, maximize soil cover, maximize the presence of living roots, and maximize biodiversity. How, though, can vegetable farmers, who customarily rely on relatively aggressive tillage disturbance with very little, if any, soil residue cover, begin to achieve soil health management in their fields? That question has inspired a whole other line of innovation recently. We turn then now to some farmers from around the world who are attempting to do just that, to see the considerable challenges that they're up against. Beginning in 2018, a group of 6 experienced California organic vegetable farmers started a dedicated joint endeavor aimed at augmenting the numerous soil health practices, such as using cover crops and compost, along with no pesticides, with their unifying goal to also reduce soil disturbance, tillage, as much as they could. This group experimented with a variety of approaches that included mowing and rolling cover crops to create a surface mulch layer that they would then plant directly into, strip tillage, in which only a narrow band of soil is worked, no tillage that involved no soil disturbance, applying banded organic fertilizer materials near the crop row to increase nutrient availability to the crop, and even using surface plastic as a means to improve moisture conditions and nitrogen cycling in the crop root zone. In just about all these cases, however, the greatly reduced disturbance practices resulted in significantly lower vegetable production, and this reduced profit to levels that were not tolerable. Crops under the reduced disturbance systems almost universally tended to be smaller and less marketable. The consensus explanation for lower yields was that it was due to a lack of nitrogen to the crops early in the season, despite there being seemingly quite a lot of it in the soil from decades of prior cover cropping and compost applications. This group of exceptionally talented and experienced organic farmers truly pushed the frontiers of reduced disturbance, surface cover, and soil health management, but in the end failed to generate crops with adequate yield. Their experiences, as well as insights of other organic farmers who have worked in this reduced disturbance space, were chronicled in the YouTube available video is Tillage Evil, produced by the Real Organic Project, that seemed to conclude that organic farmers are already doing pretty well with their soil health approaches without needing to add reduced disturbance to their management.
Well, in a very, very few words, I would say that we've learned that all of our efforts have been a great advertisement for tillage so far.
The big lesson that we've learned is that there's a time and place for no-till, but it's very small on our particular farm system. We've been messing with no-till since 1997. So we're pretty well versed in 25 years. We started it, we've tinkered with it off and on. We do no-till whenever it's possible, but it's very rarely possible. And where we do no-till is following rice that we will plant right into the rice straw, a cover crop for seed, and that works, and it works very well. But other than that, with our mix of crops, the type of crops we're growing, the time we're planting, the way we're harvesting, we are disturbing the soil, and we have not been able to figure out. There's many other, as I'll probably hit on them, other reasons of the problems of no-till, at least on California row crop. And as far as I know, I know of no organic no-till row crop farmer in California. That maybe if you're on 1 or 2 acres and you can do stuff by hand, but of any size at all, I know that it simply has not been functional.
We've had a very difficult time backing off of tillage to a very large extent. As Phil says, we don't call it no-till because we haven't been able to really operate these systems without doing a strip till, So we'll till a very narrow strip, say on an 80-inch bed. In a tomato crop, for instance, we'll till a 10-inch wide strip on an 80-inch bed in order to either direct seed or transplant a tomato plant into. That's as close to no-till as we've gotten.
Let me just clarify for people that we're talking about reduced or no-till in organic vegetable production.
Vegetable production.
Yes, so that means no herbicides. And,
no herbicides.
Well, I know, but that is a given in most no-till. Herbicides are...
Yeah, so we're trying to create successful systems of no-till or vastly reduced till organic vegetable production at scale, because we have quite a number of small 5-acre or less farms. Probably one of the best examples would be the Singing Frog farm up in Sebastopol that have learned to do no-till very successfully, but on a very small scale.
Yes.
That's a whole different world.
Yes.
And what we're working with are farms that are anywhere from 200 to 2,000 acres of scale that are mechanized. So to do no-till organic, certified organic production systems on those is a big uphill climb and an ask. So we've learned a significant amount. We're in our 4th year of collaboration right now. Really the only system that we have come up with that can provide the same yields as a full tillage system is growing a cover crop, maybe as much as 10,000 pounds of dry matter per acre, multi-species, mowing that down, very fine scale on top of an 80-inch bed, and applying your compost over the top of that. And then you got to have drip irrigation on the surface right under that. And then you cover the whole thing with a plastic mulch, and you can plant your crops through that, and you can get the same kind of yields as you do in a full tillage system. That's really all of when, we're in a semi-arid climate out here in the West. So things don't work the same as they do in a high rainfall area, rain-fed agriculture in the Midwest or on the East Coast. And so when you grow a cover crop and you just roll it down and mow it or kill it and leave it on the surface, put your compost on the surface, and then try to grow a crop through there with drip irrigation, which is what we pretty much all have to use out here now because of the scarcity of water, it doesn't work because that material just sits inert and dry on the surface and doesn't start to really break down very much until the next winter, when hopefully you get rainfall. And so the crop that you're trying to grow through that system it's short of nutrients. We're not mineralizing the nutrients out of those inputs without tilling them under 6 inches and keeping them moist and warm all the time, and in association with the microbes that can consume them and release the fertility for the crop.
So just to kind of clarify for somebody who's not a farmer who's listening to this, if you grow a green manure crop and you till it in, that plant matter, as it's breaking down, is providing a feast for microbes, and those microbes are providing a wonderful balance of nutrients to the plants that are growing. And so it's that incorporating it into the soil that gives you the benefit for the next crop. Because people won't understand this.
So, I mean, everything on this planet is a recycling system. You know, things grow up, plants, animals, they die, they go back into the soil. The microbial system consumes them and makes all of that nutrients that were tied up in those bodies of either plants or animals available to a new cycle of plant and animal life. And that requires moisture, temperature, and a robust microbial community. And that exists, a few inches under the soil, but it doesn't exist on the top of on the surface in a dry environment. So we're inching along. I think what the results we're getting from the plastic mulch system are awesome, but everybody hates plastic now. I mean, plastic is the latest plague of the planet, and for good reasons.
What I've seen is that if you're not building a thatch, if it doesn't have the opportunity to build on itself, at least in California weather, you're better off not leaving it all up top. You're better off mixing it in some, and then there's the timing that, okay, if you mix it in, you don't want to be mixing it in the day before you're planting. It starts tying up, the carbon is tying up the nitrogen the microbes are using to break down the carbon. Your whole growth pattern, which you can bank on, and we're growing really high value crops, we have to be timely on what we're doing. So we have developed a system that basically we put on the compost and the cover crop 2 weeks before we plant. And they have a symbiotic relationship, and the fields seem to do a lot better when that's done together. And then we put it in just enough that it's out of the way, the cover crop, like 3 inches, which is also how deep we're going to run a cultivating knife to kill weeds as the season goes on. We're going to have weeds come. Weeds are the #1 reason that we do not do no-till. There's a lot of others. If you could prove that one right, I could give you others. But that's the big deal. That's the weeds. And so cultivating 3 inches, that gives us a chance for us to keep our hoeing costs down because we have no herbicides.
The ultimate goal is that cover crop becomes mulch. That becomes the weed barrier, if you will. That becomes the cover so that when it's year round, you have some kind of armoring of the soil. You have that live root that remains in the soil, and then you're able to grow that next crop, that cash crop, in that permanent cover. And so we are doing that on some kind of modified basis. I have to tell you quite honestly, I felt like I was pulling my hair out the first few years, and again, it can be crop specific. Obviously, a more aggressive plant, like a winter squash, even transplanted crops like broccolis and things like that then can grow past that competition, work way better than carrots and onions. That's off the table right now.
I think in what we've been doing over time, because we've been very, very focused on compost and cover crops. And I think what we've been doing, and we have some research from UC Davis who researchers have been here to the farm measuring carbon at depth. I think by being religious in our application of compost and cover crops, we have boosted our organic matter levels, and with that, organic matter levels means that we put carbon in the ground, and we're not farming the carbon out of the ground. And we had a study here where they looked at our hedgerows to see, because we have designed the farm where we have hedgerows around the farm, and the hedgerows provide us habitat for beneficial insects and they're sanctuaries for bees and spiders and all the things that can do eco-services in the field that are next door. They looked at our organic matter in these hedgerows and looked at organic matter in the field, and they looked at different depths. And we had more carbon at depth in our fields. And it may be that it's because we've been actively growing as much carbon as we can and feeding the system with carbon for as much of the year as we can. So in the wintertime, if we don't have a crop there, we'll grow a cover crop that is harvesting sunlight, carbon dioxide, making sugars for plants. Those sugars are a form of carbon. And you have earthworms and all this activity that will pull that carbon down deep. And we've been in an active relationship in growing that carbon cycle. Whereas something that's static, that goes through the senescence of summer, a hedgerow that are shrubs and trees and grasses that are underneath that, it basically takes kind of a break during that time when there's no moisture feeding that system. But I think our application of moisture and our focus on cover crops has actually allowed us to bring carbon in. And the deeper you put it, the more stable it is.
But much different structure from what we saw in the field where we tilled, more of a thatch layer working in here in the top. Probably not enough moisture in this area right in here to get real active earthworms right now, but you can certainly see there's been a lot of earthworm activity in here when there's been enough moisture for them to work up to the surface. Yeah. But the organic matter here is probably not too much different than the vegetable field next to it. This is probably running around 3% in this part of the ranch, and we're probably 3% close to it right next to it.
So you can certainly build the organic matter with tillage.
Or a system where you're using, quite an extensive cover cropping.
Of course.
The tillage is just a tool to, get cover crop into the soil or prepare a seed bed.
Scott, I want to just make a call out that you're not a naysayer. You've been actively trying to make reduced tillage work and even no-till for years now.
25
easy. Years.
Yeah.
And you've gambled a fair amount of money on pretty big experiments that didn't always work.
Well, here, let me give you verification to what you just said. So 2019, we feel very good about our farm. I feel comfortable with what we're doing ethically, financially, environmentally, social fairness. I'll put our farm against any farm. But it's been a long process to get. But in 2019, Brian and I went, let's see if we can even ratchet the farm purity per se to a higher level. Okay, and one of those, we figured there's 3 legs more that we could add in this summertime after wheat. And that was, instead of tilling in the wheat straw lightly, leave it on top. So that's a no-till. The second one was, everyone's banging the drum for multi-species. And we agree, multi-species is great. So normally we just pre-irrigate the wheat after we've harvested it. The wheat comes up, never makes it in the harvester. And so we get a volunteer wheat come as a cover crop, and then we'll go drill some black eyes in with it just to get some legume cereal, very cheap, very economical, easy to manage, good for the ground. Well, instead we did the multi-species, 7 different types of cover crop, and then finally we grazed it. Okay, and we have actually started into grazing. We're having up to 6,000 animals grazing through the winter, spring, and fall. Summer it's too hot. Although we've had some here because it's been so dry, the hills, there's nowhere for them to go. So actually they've been here most of the summer. So, but anyway, so these are the 3 radical steps for our farm: multi-species, no-till, grazing. Long story short, we harvested crops that we did that on in 2019 compared to crops that we didn't do it on in the summer of 2019. We lost over $500,000 by doing the no-till, graze, multi-species addition. And I have spent all of 2020 after we harvested, and 2021 trying to figure out, asking people from agronomists, scientists, Australia, Canada, through the Midwest, all the UC system, which I do a lot of stuff with. Every answer that I was giving, I could refute. I know the farms well enough. I know all the stuff that they were saying, oh, you know, like you didn't get enough water. No, we did get enough water. We got 14 inches instead of with our normal 17, but we pre-irrigated twice. And it was 7 months in between the time of the no-till to the time we planted. Anyway, so what just isn't also to support what you're saying is that we keep trying. We have a trial going right now that we separated out. We have 6 blocks replicated 3 times, that we're leaving out the grazing, we're leaving out the no-till, we're leaving out the multi-species in order to see what was it that did that to us. Because it was, we have no idea. Everything looked perfect, everything looked fine, and no plants, they didn't look bad, they just didn't grow well. They just didn't grow like our normal practices. So, you know, yeah, and one of the things was I was really an idiot. You're going to do something like that, do it on 30 acres. I did it on 350. But it's the same thing. If I went and asked any professor, any agronomist, they'd be going, oh, no, summer, all that, oh, that's so good, oh, that's so great. You know, well, hey, guess what? It wasn't so great, not at all, not even close.
The quest for organic, no pesticide, reduced disturbance vegetable production techniques has so far proven to be a very challenging goal to achieve. That is not to say, however, that there haven't been examples of progress toward eventual paths that may ultimately lead in that direction or achieve that goal. In Brazil, for example, university and government ag workers report a growing number of farmers pursuing no-tillage vegetable production and without herbicide inputs that often accompany the well-established and large-scale use of no-till for corn, soybeans, wheat, and cotton in that country. Systems that are being tried for vegetables usually, but not always, involve using transplants, and farmers there are consciously working to diversify their no-till rotations and to avoid problems that have been associated with their more monoculture agronomic cropping systems by using cover crops that provide surface mulch to help with weed control. A concluding example of rather spectacular progress on the design and realization of reduced disturbance mulch production systems for vegetables comes from Germany, where Johannes Storch and his many partners at Live to Give since the year 2007 have come up with an impressive full system for vegetable growing with mulch that includes the deliberate creation of surface soil biomass mulch from cover crops and the use of precisely engineered high residue handling equipment that enables direct transplanting and seeding of vegetables into the mulch. In Storch's system, a thick cover crop derived surface mulch is first created. A fast spinning cutting coulter is used to cut through the mulch, creating a slot into which transplants are placed. The system relies on seeding a cover crop during the winter, mowing the cover crop with the flail mower in the spring, and actually spreading more mulch over the top of the mowed cover crop to prevent it from regrowing. This is truly a heavy surface mulch production system that looks and functions very differently from today's largely clean cultivation systems. Another option that Storch has developed involves lifting and repositioning or mixing the mulch over the soil surface and then dropping it back down onto the soil to enable direct seeding into the soil below. The progress shown here is important for several reasons. It first demonstrates really a whole systems approach to achieving reduced disturbance soil health management production systems for vegetable crops. Second, the approach involves examples of a new generation of equipment and management solutions that may eventually become part of how true reduced disturbance production techniques for vegetables are eventually achieved. In another respect, this pioneering work, while maybe not yet scalable or successful in all instances, is very important in that it has broadly sought what are clearly new production paradigms that essentially break the mold of traditional intensive tillage models that have dominated vegetable production for nearly a century. Rather than merely continue slight tweaks to conventional tillage approaches, what Storch and his partners have done is imagine a brand new set of goals and the vastly new and different visions for how these goals might be achieved. It will now be in the hands and minds of the next generation of innovators and pioneers to further continue this work and expand the scale to which it is achieved.